Mike Licona has a doctorate in the resurrection and crucifixion of Jesus. He is very well renowned on this, and I would like him to share with us how he explains to Muslims about the crucifixion.
The death of Jesus by crucifixion in the first century is one of the best attested facts of the ancient world, and even skeptics such as Bart Ehrman and John Dominic Crossan, Gerrit Ludemann, many skeptics who are not believers but are bona fide scholars studying this will admit this. There are numerous non-Christian sources who mention Jesus' execution by the Romans. I think of Josephus, Tacitus, Lucian, Mar Bar-Sarabian. They all mention Jesus' execution by the Romans. Now, I do think that a Muslim could respond to this and say, well, the Qur'an says that God made it appear that he died. And so this just shows that the Qur'an would be correct. So, I mean, it doesn't necessarily, it would be compatible with that view, of course. But you do have a couple of problems there, I think, to say that Jesus he didn't die by crucifixion. Not only did God deceive Jesus' enemies, like the Jews and the Romans, but he also deceived the earliest Christians. And the Qur'an does refer to Jesus' apostles, his followers, as Muslims. So that means that God deceived the earliest Muslims who were following Jesus. And you got to ask, well, why would he do that? Why would he convince these earliest believers who were followers of Jesus that Jesus had died by crucifixion, and so therefore they could go and perpetrate the largest religion in the world, the largest, most formidable opponent to Islam today? That wouldn't seem to be too smart on God's part if that's what he was doing. But I think there's some additional evidence for Jesus' death by crucifixion that should be considered, especially by Muslims. And that would be this. Aside from our books, like the New Testament says that Jesus died by crucifixion. The Qur'an says, no, he didn't. So if we just lay all that aside, our two books, and say, well, what can we show historically? We can look at the Qur'an historically. We can look at the New Testament historically. But what can we actually demonstrate historically? I think one thing that we can do is we can show that Jesus predicted his imminent and violent death. And as a student of history, the way I would do that, I've written on this, published a journal article in an academic journal, published it in a book as well. We can come to certain texts in the Bible, the Gospels, let's say, without even granting that they were divinely inspired or even generally reliable, historically speaking. We can show that Jesus actually predicted his imminent death and resurrection.